All right, let's dig into a really fascinating case study. We're going to uncover the hidden story of a beautiful, historic neighborhood and reveal the constant, invisible battles happening right under those perfect lawns and charming homes. It turns out every single home has a story to tell. And a huge part of that story isn't in the walls or the architecture. It's buried in a super complex network just beneath the surface. Okay, let's get into this. So our story is set in the Biltmore area of Phoenix, which is really well known for this amazing mix of 1920s estates and classic mid-century homes. But what you don't see underneath all that charm is a plumbing network that's basically the area's unseen circulatory system. And as you can imagine, that system faces some pretty unique challenges. And that brings us to the first major conflict in our story. It's this constant, invisible battle between the homes themselves and the very environment they're built on. And this is really a war on multiple fronts, starting with the water itself. The first attacker? Hard water. The water in Phoenix has an incredibly high mineral content. Now, the best way to think about this is like arterial clogs for your house. This mineral buildup literally chokes the water flow, which leads to all sorts of pressure problems and causes your fixtures to fail way earlier than they should. Next up in this assault is the heat. And we're not talking about just a warm day. We're talking about summer temperatures that soar past 115 degrees. This kind of extreme heat makes pipes constantly expand and contract, putting this unbelievable amount of stress on every single joint and connection in the whole system. It's just this slow, relentless physical strain. And finally, you've got the ground itself. See, the Biltmore area has a lot of clay soil, which basically acts like a giant sponge. It expands when it's wet and then shrinks when it's dry. Imagine the ground literally squeezing and stretching your underground sewer lines. That's the kind of immense pressure we're talking about, and it can easily lead to cracks and breaks. It's like skeletal stress on the entire network. So the next threat isn't just a passive condition like the soil or the heat. Nope, this one is an active invasion. The mature trees in the area, we're talking big ones like eucalyptus and mesquite, are constantly on the hunt for water. And guess what? Your pipes are prime target. So how does this invasion actually happen? Well, it's a surprisingly simple four-step process. First, a tiny crack forms in a pipe, maybe from that shifting soil we just talked about. Second, the tree roots, they're smart. They sense the moisture escaping. Third, they worm their way into that crack, growing right into the pipe to get to that constant water source. And finally, they just keep growing and expanding until they create a complete blockage, which, well, that leads to disastrous backups inside your house. Okay, so you've got attacks from the environment, attacks from nature, but sometimes the biggest threat is already inside the house. In these historic homes, you'll find what we can only call ghosts in the pipes, this legacy of outdated materials that were installed decades and decades ago. And really, this whole conflict comes down to the materials. See, older cast iron and galvanized pipes literally corrode from the inside out. This creates these rough, jagged surfaces that are just perfect for catching debris and forming clogs. Contrast that with modern materials like copper and PEX. They're super corrosion resistant, they have smooth surfaces, and they ensure you get consistent pressure and a much, much longer, reliable lifespan. It's a night and day difference. Now, after hearing about all these threats, it might feel like a losing battle. But this is where the story really shifts. Homeowners are not helpless. Today, there's an entire arsenal of modern technology and specialized knowledge designed specifically to fight back against these hidden problems. And the great part is, for every threat, there's a specific, really effective modern solution. A high-tech sewer camera can find those root intrusions before they cause a huge backup, which then allows for treatments like hydrojetting. A simple water pressure test can reveal that hard water buildup, which can be totally solved with water softeners. And for those old, aging pipes, a visual inspection can tell you if it's time for a whole home repipe, completely eliminating the problem for good. Okay, so why does this whole Biltmore case study matter to you, even if you live hundreds or thousands of miles away? Because every single home, no matter where it is, has its own unique version of this story. It has its own hidden network, facing its own set of environmental challenges. So what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, remember that your home is always, always fighting its surroundings. Second, those older materials aren't just old. They are an active hidden risk. Third, nature is persistent and it will always find a way in. But here's the most important part. Modern technology lets you find these problems before they turn into catastrophic emergencies. And that just leaves us with one final thought. Your house can't speak, right? But every gurgle, every slow drain, every little change in water pressure, that's all part of its story. So the real question is, are you listening to what your pipes are trying to tell you?